The call came on a Saturday morning in October, and by the time I hung up, I already knew the dinner that night was going to change everything. But I should start from the beginning. My name is not important. What matters is that I spent 34 years building a property management company in Victoria, British Columbia. The kind of business where you know every tenant by name, where you shake hands on deals before the paperwork arrives, where your reputation is the only currency that actually matters. I raised my son, Owen, in that world. After my wife passed from ovarian cancer 6 years ago, it was just the two of us. And for a long time, that was enough. Owen is 31. He has his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, which is both a blessing and a problem. He works in commercial real estate now, good at it, honest, the way I tried to raise him to be. When he called me last spring to say he'd met someone, I didn't think much of it. He dated before. He's a handsome kid. I figured it would run its course. Her name was Simone. No, wait. Her name was Petra. Petra Vance. She introduced herself that way the first time Owen brought her to my house in Saanich, handshake firm, smile wide, dressed like she'd come from a photo shoot rather than a Sunday afternoon drive. She was 33, she said. A lifestyle content creator, which I've learned is the modern way of saying you take pictures of yourself in nice places and convince companies to pay you for it. She had 200,000 followers on Instagram. She mentioned this within the first 20 minutes. I smiled and passed the potatoes. She asked about the business that same evening. Casual questions, or questions that were meant to sound casual. How many units did I manage? Was it incorporated? Did I have partners? I told her we managed about 400 residential units across Greater Victoria and a handful of commercial properties in the West Shore. She nodded thoughtfully, like she was filing the answer somewhere. Owen was beaming across the table, completely blind to it. After she left that night, I stood at the kitchen sink and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not dislike exactly, more like the feeling you get when you drive past an accident on the highway. The instinct to slow down, look more carefully, make sure you understand what you're seeing before you keep going. I kept going, for a while. Over the next 3 months, Petra became a fixture. She came to Owen's birthday dinner at the Empress Hotel in June. She posted about it, of course, a photo of the two of them in the Bengal Lounge with the caption "Old Money Energy, etc." which I found both inaccurate and slightly insulting. She started talking about their future together very early. Children, a house in Oak Bay, a life that sounded expensive and fully formed, like she'd been planning it long before she met Owen. By August, Owen told me he was thinking about proposing. I asked him to wait. I told him I just wanted more time to get to know her. He took it well, better than I expected. He said, "Of course, Dad, whatever you need." And I could see he meant it. That's the thing about Owen. He's fundamentally decent. He assumed everyone else was too. I hired someone to run a background check. I want to be clear about this. I don't do this with everyone. I'd never done it before in my life. But there was something about the way Petra asked questions, not curious questions, investment questions, that made me feel like I owed it to Owen to look. What came back was not what I expected. Petra Vance had 2 previous evictions in the Lower Mainland, one in Burnaby and one in New Westminster, both within the last 5 years. She had a credit score so damaged it looked like it had been through a shredder. There was a small claims judgment against her in BC for an unpaid loan of $11,000, never settled. The Instagram account, the sponsored posts, the lifestyle brand, none of it had produced any documented income above a few $100s a month. The car she drove was leased in someone else's name. I don't know whose name. My investigator couldn't get that far. I sat with this information for 2 weeks. I didn't tell Owen. I wasn't ready to blow up his happiness without being certain of what I was seeing. Maybe there were explanations. People go through hard times. Credit gets destroyed by circumstances beyond your control. I know that. I've seen it happen to good tenants. But I watched her more carefully after that, and what I watched didn't reassure me. She started dropping hints around Owen about a joint account, about how transparent couples share their finances. She mentioned twice that a content creator friend of hers had just bought a condo in Cole Harbor with her partner's help while she got the brand off the ground. Owen laughed the first time. The second time, he looked at me over her head with a slightly uncomfortable expression. He knew something was being said. He just didn't know what to do with it. In September, Owen proposed anyway. He didn't tell me beforehand. He did it at dinner in Tofino on their weekend trip up the island. Petra posted about the engagement the same night, a photo of her hand with the ring, caption, "He asked," I said obviously, before Owen had even called me to share the news. I heard from my nephew before I heard from my son. Owen called the next morning, sheepish, apologetic, clearly excited underneath all of it. I told him congratulations and meant it, because I love my son and he was happy. But I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Petra with accusations. I wasn't going to present the background check to Owen and watch him feel like I'd investigated the woman he loved. I was going to wait for her to show me who she was. Because people like Petra, people who are performing a version of themselves rather than actually being it, they always do. You just have to give them enough space. I didn't have to wait long. My company hosts a client appreciation event every autumn. I've done it for 20 years. A dinner cruise out of the inner harbor, usually 50 or 60 people, property owners, long-term tenants, business partners, a few city officials I've worked with over the years. Owen usually comes. This year, I invited Petra as well. It seemed like the right gesture, bringing her into that world, letting her feel like family. The boat was a 72-foot catamaran, the kind they use for corporate charters out of Victoria Harbor. Nothing extravagant by some standards, but comfortable. A good evening. Clear skies, calm water, the lights of the city behind us as we moved toward the strait. I was in the middle of a conversation with my accountant, near the stern, when Petra appeared at my elbow. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" she said. "Privately." I told my accountant I'd be right back. I followed Petra to the forward deck, which was empty. The wind was mild. She was smiling the way she smiled in her Instagram posts, not with her eyes. "I wanted to talk to you about something before the wedding planning really gets going," she said. I waited. "I've been thinking about the future. Owen's future. Our future." She paused. "I know you're planning to retire in the next few years. I know the business is worth a lot." Another pause, longer this time. "I think it would make sense, for Owen's stability, for you to start transitioning some assets now. A transfer. Something significant. So we have a real foundation to build on." I kept my expression completely neutral. "How much were you thinking?" She didn't hesitate. 800,000 to start. To start. "And if I'm not comfortable with that?" I asked. She tilted her head slightly, like she was considering how to phrase something she'd already planned. "I'd hate for things to become complicated. I've been thinking about that afternoon in your office in July, when you called me in to talk about Owen's finances." She let that sit in the air for a moment. "I remember it differently than you might. And I have a friend who works with a victims advocacy organization in Vancouver. Things can get very public very quickly, in ways that are hard for a business like yours to recover from." She was describing an afternoon that had never happened. I had never met with Petra alone in my office. Not once. Owen had been present every single time I'd been in the same room as that woman for more than 2 minutes. I reached into my jacket pocket. She stiffened slightly. I think she expected a check. I pulled out my phone, set it on the railing between us, and pressed stop on the voice memo I had started recording 40 seconds into our conversation, the moment she said, "privately." I'd like to say her face went completely white. It didn't go white exactly. It went very still, like a lake before a storm comes in. "Petra," I said, "I want you to listen to me carefully. What you just described, a false accusation of assault made to extract money, is extortion under the Criminal Code of Canada. That's Section 346. It carries a maximum sentence of 14 years. I kept my voice level, the way I keep my voice level when a tenant is 2 months behind and we're having a conversation that neither of us wants to have. "I'm going to ask you to go inside, collect your things, and let me know when you've arranged a ride back to the dock." She stood very still for another moment. Then she said, "Owen won't believe you." "That's his choice to make," I said, "but this recording isn't going away." She went inside. She found Owen, and I watched through the window as she said something to him, whatever version of the story she was going to try. Owen looked confused, then concerned. Then he looked toward the window where I was standing, and something in my face must have told him what he needed to know, because he stepped back from her. Just slightly. Just enough. She left the boat when we docked 40 minutes later, without another word to me. That night, after the other guests had gone, Owen and I sat in my kitchen in Saanich, the same kitchen where she'd asked about my company over Sunday dinner, and I played him the recording from the beginning. All of it. He listened without speaking. When it ended, he sat there for a long time, turning his ring box over in his hands, the box he'd kept after Tofino. "She never loved me," he said finally. "I don't know," I said, and I meant it. I don't know what she felt. I only know what she did. Owen returned the ring by courier to her apartment in James Bay 3 days later. He wrote no note. There was nothing to say. In November, I sat down with my solicitor, not my accountant, my solicitor, and we drafted a formal complaint to the Victoria Police. The recording was clear. The threat was explicit. The Crown Attorney's Office reviewed it and agreed there was sufficient evidence to proceed. Petra was charged with extortion in December. She retained a lawyer and applied for bail, which was granted under conditions that included no contact with Owen or with me. The case is still before the courts as I write this. I won't speculate about the outcome. The justice system moves at its own pace, and I've made peace with that. What I haven't quite made peace with is the 2 weeks I spent sitting on the background check, second-guessing myself. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't started that recording, if I'd been less careful, if I'd let myself believe that the discomfort I felt was just a father being overprotective of his son. My generation was told to mind our own business when it came to our children's relationships, to trust, to give the benefit of the doubt. I'm not sure that's wisdom anymore. I think sometimes it's just a polite way of looking away. Owen is doing well. He's been seeing a therapist, his idea, not mine, and he talks about it openly, which is something men of my generation were not particularly good at. I'm proud of him for that. He came over for Thanksgiving in October, just the two of us, and we watched the Canucks lose badly to the Leafs and argued about it for an hour, and it was one of the best evenings I've had in a long time. He asked me, at some point during the second period, how I knew to start recording when I did, how I knew something was coming. I told him the truth. I didn't know exactly. I just knew that a woman who asks about your father's assets before she's been to your apartment twice is not asking because she's curious. She's asking because she's measuring. And when someone is measuring you, it's usually worth knowing why. He nodded slowly. The Leafs scored again. He swore quietly. I've been in business for 34 years. I've shaken hands with men who later tried to sue me. I've rented to tenants who stripped the copper wiring from the walls on the way out. I've had a city councilor try to delay my permits because he didn't like the company I kept. None of that prepares you for watching your own son almost lose a year of his life to someone who saw him as a balance sheet. But here's what I know. After all of it, the people who come into your life with their hands already open are rarely coming to give you something. And the best protection you have against extortion, against manipulation, against people who are very good at seeming like what they're not, is the same thing it's always been. Pay attention. Trust your instincts. And if something tells you to press record, press record. The dinner table is quiet these days, but it's honest. And for a man my age, after everything, that's more than enough. I still think about the moment Petra said to start. Those 2 words told me everything I needed to know about how she saw my son. Not as a partner, not as someone she'd chosen, but as an access point. A door she'd already decided to walk through, one way or another. What happened to her wasn't bad luck. It was consequence. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind you see in movies. It was quieter than that, and slower. She made a series of choices, each one built on a foundation of dishonesty, and eventually that foundation couldn't hold the weight of what she was trying to build on top of it. I didn't destroy her plan. She destroyed it herself the moment she decided to threaten a man who'd spent 3 decades learning to stay calm when the pressure was highest. I've thought a lot about what protected Owen in the end, and I don't think it was me exactly. It was the fact that he was raised to value honesty, not as a rule handed down from above, but as something practical, something that actually makes your life work better over time. When I played him that recording and he sat quietly and listened to every word, he didn't fall apart. He was hurt deeply, the way anyone would be. But he was able to hear the truth and accept it, because he'd spent his whole life being honest himself. That's what integrity does. It makes you capable of recognizing its absence in other people, even when it's painful. The intelligence I used that night on the boat wasn't anything special. I didn't outmaneuver Petra because I'm particularly clever. I outmaneuver her because I was paying attention when she wasn't expecting it. I'd noticed the questions she asked at dinner. I'd read the background check carefully. I'd listened to the things Owen said without quite realizing what he was describing. Information was there. I just didn't look away from it. Wisdom, I think, is mostly just the willingness to see what's actually in front of you without letting hope or politeness talk you out of it. And then there's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The part that comes after you know something difficult. I sat on that background check for 2 weeks. I didn't act immediately, because acting immediately felt reckless, like I might do more damage than good. I waited. I stayed steady. I went to that boat with a phone in my pocket and a plan in my head, and when she made her move, I was ready. That kind of steadiness doesn't come from confidence. Not really. It comes from having made hard decisions before, from having stood in difficult rooms and gotten through them. You learn, over enough years, that most situations reward patience far more than they reward speed. Owen will be fine. He's already fine in most of the ways that matter. He came over last month and we watched the game. And he laughed easily, the way he used to before all of this. Whatever Petra took from him, a year, an illusion, a version of the future he'd been holding on to, she didn't take that laugh. She didn't take the part of him that's capable of trusting again, when the time is right and the person is worth it. I keep the voice memo on my phone still. I don't listen to it, I just know it's there. Some things you hold on to, not because you need them, but because they remind you that you handled it, right when it mattered. That's enough for me.